we turn rejection into a fight or flight reaction instead of the third way I advocate, which is being persistent, being nice, but also negotiate. Try to find a way to get it done.
Here's the key to my front door. You got a pillow if you lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a Here's somebody who believes you. And let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
Welcome to The Creator's Journey. I'm your host, Charles Gupton. Fears and obstacles on the journey of creation are things we all face. Every creator who works from the heart faces the same challenges. You're not alone. In each episode, I talk with creative leaders about the mindsets and processes they use to push through their struggles to create and put their work out into the world in order to make a difference. Thanks for joining me on this journey.
Here's the key to my front door. You got a pillow if you lost yours. You got a seat at my table. You got a home. Here's somebody who believes you. Let truth remind you. You've always got a place to go to. You got a home.
What is the most consistent, if not the biggest single obstacle to pursuing and achieving the deepest desires of your heart? For many people, it is the fear that when they ask for help in accomplishing something they need or want, whether it's for a raise in pay at work or funding for their startup venture, or even just seeking advice on a vexing situation, it's that they will be turned away or rejected in some form. If you've ever faced that fear in one form or another, my guest today, Jiang, has experience and helpful advice that can guide you through that process on your creative journey. Jia burst into the public's view within days after he started documenting his 100 Days of Rejection project and then posting his efforts on his blog and on YouTube. Each day, Jia would ask someone for a seemingly preposterous request in an attempt to steel himself against rejection and to learn to live more fearlessly. One of his early lessons was that even the most ridiculous request stood a better chance of being granted if you'll simply ask in the right way. The experience and lessons learned eventually led Jia to writing his best-selling book, Rejection Proof: How I Beat Fear and Became Invincible Through 100 Days of Rejection. I met Jia at the World Domination Summit in Portland, Oregon in 2015 during a workshop he was leading on dealing with rejection. And it wasn't just a lecture. He had the group go out on the streets and practice the process of asking for things from people that would surely cause us to face rejection. He called it our rejection therapy session. Although the exercises weren't the same ones you might experience in your daily life, for example, we were walking up to strangers and asking for money, but the process still lit up the same parts of the brain and brought on the same response of avoidance that we do face every day. I immediately knew Jia would bring great value to the listeners of this show. The irony for me is that it's taken about a year of persistent follow-up and facing my own fear of Jia rejecting me to get our schedules to align so that we could have this conversation. All the while I kept thinking, Jia's going to say no and reject me, but unless he outright refuses to talk with me, I need to keep following the examples he writes about from his own experience and keep following up and asking. So I did, and here we are. Jia, welcome to the show, and thanks for not casting me into the pit of everlasting abandonment.
Thank you for having me here. By the way, Charles, I have to say you're very persistent, and it just happened that, it's never my intention to reject you, but it was just never
not at all
lined up for me. But you know what? You really learn how to deal with rejection. You're one of the best.
And I've learned so much from you. You have influenced my work over the time that I've known you and read your work and seen your work in more ways than I can say. So thank you for all you've done to help me and other folks out there.
No problem.
Your workshop was one of the most practical that Linda and I have ever attended and got so much out of it. So good job on that front.
I'm so glad. And just, there is I often tell people there's a number that's associated with every rejection. You don't know what that number is. It could be a large number or a small number, but there is a number. If you go through that number, no matter what your request is, it goes from a no to a yes. So the number for you actually is a little bit. It's not small, but you definitely went through it.
That was one of the more fascinating things to me. So go into that a little bit more.
Basically, we see rejection as a binary thing, right? As a yes and no, and we also see rejection as a one-time shot. If we ask someone something, someone said no, that means that person probably has put a lot of thought into this and eventually made a decision that's best for him. So we shouldn't just bother him or her again, and we should just live with that decision. That's usually how our brain works. And because we are afraid of rejection, we try to rationalize, we try to be comfortable. So that's why we usually try rejection. I mean, ask for something just once. But the thing is, a lot of times, the people who are getting requested, there are different things they're attending to. There are different priorities for them. It's not like they don't want to do. They're saying no to you. They're not like they're saying no to you as a person. They're not saying no to you permanently. But at that moment, that they might feel like it might not be the best for them. So sometimes it's up to us to actually give them a chance by being persistent on our chance, being not just persistent but also respectful. So and so by doing that, a lot of times a no becomes a yes. And also, I found there's not a request that you have that the world cannot say yes to. Stay with the realm of physical possibilities, right? I haven't found anything that you just say everyone in the world will reject you all the time. So sometimes it's just it's a skill to find the right person, but also asking the right amount of times, and you will get a yes.
Well, that has fueled a lot of my persistence, and I thank you for the compliment earlier. I think persistence is probably one of my strongest qualities.
Oh yeah.
But what I've learned through the years is that persistence alone can be annoying. But as you said earlier, being gracious and learning how to do it in a nicer manner, if you will, or a more acceptable manner, will get a lot of people more inclined to want to help you as opposed to just being annoyed by you.
Absolutely. And in your emails, in your requests, you're all gracious and very nice, and it's very important, because you don't want to, when you make requests, you never want to blame the other person. You never want to, feel like entitled in getting a yes. So, and having that mentality and that kind of, I guess, grace is a good word. It's very important to get you, for you to get a yes from someone eventually. And I'll share another story with you. There was this guy, when I was doing my 100 Days of Rejection, he started following up on my Facebook requests, on my Facebook posts and on my YouTube videos. And what he wanted me to do is he wanted me to interview a female body, like what's the
a bodybuilder.
That's right, a female bodybuilder. And I'm like, why? I have no interest in interviewing anyone in female bodybuilding. But he's like, he has this fear of rejection, but he's interested in female bodybuilding. He thinks that muscularity plus feminine beauty is something that he really enjoys, but he's afraid to talk to female bodybuilders. So he's like, can you do it for me? Can you do it for me? Here's the questions. And like, I just like, no. And I'm like, I'm not interested. But he was very, persistent. And he kept coming at me different ways, not just in a single channel, but different ways. He kept giving me different reasons. And he was never unhappy or anything like that. So eventually I'm like, this must be means a lot to this person. So, and he pinged me 42 times, I believe. And so I'm like, if it means that much to this guy, like 42 times, then it should mean something to me as well. So eventually I said yes, and I interviewed a female bodybuilder on his behalf, and I started, I asked the questions, and it was a lot of fun. But again, there's like, if you know how to ask, if you don't give up, but if you don't do it in a very annoying way, there's never an end of this conversation. You know what I mean?
I do. As I said, it was a great inspiration for me. A lot of the guests that I'm trying to have conversations with for this show are extremely busy people, and I know that it just takes a matter of time to get on their schedule. A lot of people are very nice and are happy, as in your case, to have a conversation, but it just takes time. But I also think just giving it that time, being persistent and waiting, and recognize sometimes it can take months before it works out. But again, the importance of having grace, and I think that's a wonderful word, having and showing grace and patience and just being there without entitlement.
Yeah, that's true. And also, this is the same principle that applies in sales, right? So if you're in corporate sales, you're trying to get a customer, it's the same thing, you know. But also, there's just another thing you can do is, if you're doing a podcast or if you're, you know, making a sales, it's actually important to figure out what the other person wants. And a lot of times, I know from my friends who are doing podcasts a lot, who are doing interviews, is when they have a book to publish, or when they have something to advertise, or they have a message they want to take to the world, then they're very open. They're actually seeking out for to spread the message. So a lot of times, if you can find out what these potential targets that you want, that you want to have, what do they want? If you can help them to achieve their goals, a lot of times your request becomes a lot easier.
I was about a year late on being able to talk about your book when it first came out, but it's no less timely now. So I'm going to encourage people to still pick up and buy your book and go back and read it a bunch, because it's still applicable.
Yeah, it's a really good book.
It is a good book.
Yeah, I like it.
I hope so. Let's jump back and talk about the limitations presented by the fear of rejection as opposed to the sting of any one actual rejection. Because it seems to me that a lot of people stop not because they're rejected, but they're afraid of being rejected. Can you talk a little bit about what you've discovered in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are our worst rejecter. You know, we think, you know, we get rejected by all other people. We get rejected by the world. But we get rejected by ourselves all the time. That's because naturally we want to stay very comfortable, right? We don't. The fear of rejection is actually natural in our DNA. You know, it keeps us survive as a species. You know, as a group, as we collaborate, and so. But that fear in today's world really limits us, because we, you know, in business and in creative world, in anything you do, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a creative person, if you want to accomplish something in business, the more impactful your work is, the more likely you will get rejected.
Right.
So that fear of rejection becomes a detriment to us. So we reject ourselves before we are willing to reach out to other people, just because we hate that feeling. And we have a lot of reasons. You know, we give ourselves reasons saying that person will never say yes to us. You know, and you know, instead of making a fool of myself, let's just not ask, and in that way I stay very comfortable. Or the more importantly, once we get one rejection, we started fitting that into our own narrative, right? So like, okay, I tried, or it's like, okay, that didn't feel good, or that person is too busy, or you know, my request wasn't good anyway. Or we turn it around, we get angry. It's like, you know, that guy's an a-hole, you know, and I hate that guy, and I shouldn't, you know, I don't want to talk to him anyway. You know, how dare you say this to me? So we turn rejection into a fight or flight reaction, instead of the third way that you did or I advocate, which is being persistent, being nice, but also negotiate. You know, try to find a way to get it done. And
also a lesson that I picked up from your book that came out of your very first rejection exercise. If I remember right, you were equivocating, just arguing with yourself about all the terrible things that could, you know, go awry. But you finally just stopped yourself with the internal statement, just ask the damn question and see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about that, if you will.
Yeah. So maybe a little background on what I did with the 100 Days of Rejection, right? So, basically every day I would, for a period of 100 days, every day I would go out and get rejected by someone, like looking to get rejected. I would ask someone a very ridiculous question, like, for example, ask someone to get $100, request a burger refill, from a cashier, and try to play soccer in someone's backyard. I mean, these are the things I would ask, because I want to desensitize myself from the pain of rejection and have some fun with this. So, and when it started, it was really tough when it started, because I just kept playing the worst nightmarish situation I had in my mind. And would this guy cuss me out? Would that person call the cop on me? And just all kind of terrible scenarios. And when I had that state of mind, nothing gets done. So in the end, I'm just like, you know what? I'm interested to see what happens. I'm interested to see his or her response. So when I have this kind of a curiosity-dominated mindset, then it became a lot easier.
I remember another aspect of what you talked about was the ask big and go big. I mean, one of the early ones that got a lot of notice was the Krispy Kreme request, where you thought it was so ridiculous that nothing would happen. And yet that's the one that seemed to bring, at least early on, the big attention to you, because you asked something so big and ridiculous, but the person actually went along with it and exceeded your expectations.
Yeah. So there are two parts of this that made this viral. One side is how ridiculous what I asked was. So I went to a Krispy Kreme donut shop to ask for them making me donuts that look like Olympic rings. So that's pretty ridiculous. That's kind of funny. But on the other hand, it was interesting because the response I got from the other person. The person said yes. The person wouldn't say no to me. Of course, she didn't have any idea I was doing this. She just thought I was a regular customer making a regular request. And she took me so seriously. So she started asking me, like, what's the color? How do they link those donuts? Those donuts, and what their colors look like, and how can she do this? And maybe she can't link them, but maybe she can, break them up and look like they're linked. And so in the end, she came up with a box of donuts that looked like the Olympic rings. And not only that, she paid for it she gave it to me. She paid for it herself. And so, and that was just, that blew me away. Right. And it just kind of hits every angle of how to make a viral video. And I did not plan for this, and it just happened. And so that video went viral.
Talk a little bit about the difference between rejection and failure. A lot of people confuse the two, and I think that's a story somewhat touches on that, where someone thinks if they were going to be rejected, they would see it as absolute failure. But you've already touched on the fact that you went into this with the express purpose of dealing with rejection, and in that you're succeeding, not failing.
Yes. I think rejections and failures are more or less cousins, but they're not equivalent, right? So failures is if you try to get a certain things accomplished, you didn't get it. You didn't get it. The results wasn't what you wanted, right? But it's more or less impersonal, So, like, for example, if your business failed, there could be many reasons. It's not like you're dumb, right? It doesn't have to be, you made all this mistake. You probably did make mistakes, but it could also because of the economy. It could also because of market factor. It could maybe just because you're unlucky, right? But when it comes to rejection, it feels extremely personal. Rejection is about not just about accomplishing anything, but not getting it. But it's about you talking to another person or a group of people for a particular request. And those people flat out said no to you for whatever reason. And now that can feel incredibly personal because you feel like they're rejecting you because the way you look, the way you talk, and the way you present the request. So there's a personal side to this always. At least it feels like it. So that's why you see a lot of books, you see a lot of talks, you see a lot of people study failure. And there's even a conference called FailCon, basically in Silicon Valley, talking about all these failed startups and what they learn. And there's a movement or tendency to over glorify failure, and to make it okay, right? So, and usually when you fail, you're like, if you fail, you can learn from it, you can grow, you can win. But with rejection, there's no rejection con. There's no people openly talking about, hey, I had divorced. My wife divorced me. Hey, I went and apply for some school I didn't get in. Hey, I actually, asked a girl out and she said no to me. You don't hear people say that very often, just because it's very personal. People don't want to talk about it. But in the end, I feel like
it is personal.
Yeah, it is. It does feel very personal. But it doesn't have to be. It really doesn't have to be. So what my job is to depersonalize rejection and turn that into a thought process when you before and during and after rejection, how you approach this, how you before you make any request, how do you minimize the amount of rejection, and during the request, how do you actually make sure it's okay to get rejected, but hopefully you don't, but it's okay to get rejected to make it comfortable for both parties. And when you do get rejected, what do? How do you negotiate and give yourself a chance to get a yes in the end? So these are different things I do. And I think it's because it's very different from failure, and most people don't talk about it.
Well, another area that, as you're talking about that occurs to me is that pain of regret that happens when people don't ask for or pursue the things that they want. And it seems to me we don't tend to look at that far away pain that regret is going to bring versus the immediate discomfort of possible rejection or failure, to be able to see a dream through to its fulfillment.
So it basically comes down to this, right? You rarely, rarely, rarely hear people say, I regret I asked that. You do sometimes, but very rarely. But you also hear people say, I'm glad I asked, or, I regret not asking. Rejection is short term, right? And we're trying to avoid that short term pain. And so over the long run, what we do is we reject ourselves. We don't give ourselves a chance, or we delay what needs to be asked. And we do this over and over again. And they add up. Eventually, if you reject yourself enough times, it really makes a huge difference in your lives. You started just, coursing your life in a way that's just the path of least resistance, or it's a path of or a common denominator. Now, a common denominator. No one's going to reject you when you're doing what everyone else is doing. So a lot of times we do that, and so eventually, as we get older, as time spent goes by, we look back, we're like, shoot, I should have asked, or I should have done that, or I should have taken that risk. And of course, our mind is incredibly at justifying this type of thing, but the thing is, we
boy, is it, yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, as we get older, the way to justify gets, eventually all these lost opportunities, they're gone. They're not coming back. So there was a nurse. You probably heard this. It's called the Diary of the Dying. It's a nurse in the Australian hospice that she interviewed all these dying patients and tabulated their answers, and they asked them what's their biggest regret in their lives. The number one thing was they lived a life to other people's expectation rather than their own, and that's mainly because people don't want to get rejected by other people. So that's why you don't want to reject yourself to the point that you started having these type of regrets. And if you take the risk, and if you do go out and ask these things, even though you're risking to get rejected right now, you will not regret it. You will not regret it. In the long run, you look back, you'll feel like, I'm glad I did it.
Talk with me a little bit about the transformation that occurs when a person shifts their fear of being rejected into a pursuit of curiosity of what happens when you ask and keep persisting. It seems that you turned a lot of your exercises into exercises of curiosity just for the sake of learning.
Yeah. So in my case, because on day 3, I did this day 3 of my 100 Days of Rejection. I asked the Olympic donuts, right? And I got a yes out of that. So that got me thinking, wow, what have I missed in my life? Just because I didn't ask, right? So if I can get a box of Olympic donuts, what else should I have asked that I would get? How many of these beautiful moments have I missed, right? So, and it got me to the point, like, it used to be what's possible, but now the question is what's not possible now. So that just opened up the whole world to me, and it seems like the world is a playground now. It seems like everything is up for grab. Everything is I should explore. And when I have that kind of a mindset or a state of mind, everything becomes more fun and more interesting. And I started just asking and try to learn from them. Try to learn from what these interactions, not just to find out the outcome, but also I was interested to know if I can actually turn a no into a yes, or is there anything I can say to actually get more yeses, or are there anything that I can do to to have a higher chance of getting a yes. So when I have that mindset, it was a lot more fun, and I had a lot less pressure or anxiety. And just I got more yeses as a result.
And also asking the question why, and seeing the power of turning a conversation around by just asking why.
Yeah.
Do you want to dig into that a little bit?
Sure. A lot of times I mentioned when we get rejected, our natural reaction is fight or flight, right? We either just say, okay, that's it. That's painful. I'm done. Or you argue with the other person, how can you say no to me? You're wrong. So, but none of this is a good way to convince anyone to get a yes, to give us a yes. The better way is just to have a third way, is to ask why. When you ask why, you're trying to find out what the other person is thinking. You're demonstrating that you're helping the other person to help you. It's like the Jerry Maguire quote, right? You help me help you, right? So when you ask why, you are demonstrating that you're trying to understand what the other person's incentive, what intention or incentive was. You're trying to help him or her solve their problem so they can help you to get what you want. So by asking why, it's a way to get a yes, but it's also a way to extend the conversation. You're never going to get a yes if you just end the conversation. But by asking why, you listen to the other person and try to find out the other person's thinking. Then you can get try to get a yes that way. So there's one example I often I use is one day I had a flower in my hand. I knock on a stranger's door, and my request was to plant this flower in someone's backyard. And I mean, that sounded ridiculous, right? No one's going to say yes. No one's going to let a stranger into their house. No way. So when I asked this guy, he said no. But before he could turn away, I asked him why. And he told me honestly that, he has a dog that will dig up anything I put in the backyard. So you should, instead of asking him, I should talk to Connie, who is his neighbor. And he said, Connie loves flowers, and you'll probably get a yes if you go talk to Connie. And I was really excited because I got a referral, and so I went across, you know how powerful referral is, So, and I went across street and talked to Connie.
I was gonna say in sales or anything.
Yeah, anything. Referral is the king. So I went across street and I did talk to Connie, and she was so happy to see me. And because she does like flowers, and half an hour later there was a flower in Connie's backyard. But the thing is, if I have left after this first rejection happened, right? I would have thought, okay, no way. Of course he's gonna say no to me because this is ridiculous. He didn't trust me, or I didn't dress up well. Maybe I didn't speak well. Maybe I didn't look good. All these type of possible reasons I would play in my mind. And then as I actually did this, it turned out to be none of those reasons. And the guy actually trusted me enough to offer me that referral. So a lot of times to ask why, and listen to the why, and try to negotiate and get a yes out of it.
Yeah, and back to referral. So often, that's one of the most powerful things that we can get out of a conversation. I mean, virtually all of my podcast guests come by referral. I usually ask, who else do you think I ought to talk with? And the referrals can be so much more powerful. But if we're not willing to ask why, or ask for help out of fear of rejection, we're not going to, or make that assumption that someone doesn't want to help us, we get nowhere.
Yeah.
So that's a powerful story.
Yeah, and let me tell you this. A lot of times we think referral happens at the moment of acceptance, right? So when someone said yes to us, it was a good experience, then we're going to ask referrals afterward, right? But actually, referrals can also be useful. Asking for referrals can also be useful at the moment of rejection. When someone says no to you, that's the moment where you can ask, well, you know the request now. You know me as a person. Who else do you think it's okay that you said no to me, but who else will can possibly say yes to this request? If you can help me, I would really appreciate it. And the reason that's very powerful is, first of all, people just don't do that. When you get rejected, you feel the pain, you feel a little bit of shame, right? You just want to fight or flight, right? The last thing you want to ask is referral. But if you calm down, ask for referral, that's a great moment to do it, because the moment of rejection, when someone said no to you, they feel a little bit indebted to you. They feel a little bit bad themselves. Because we're not natural in saying no to people. That's not what we do. We like to be liked. We like to say yes to people, but sometimes we have to say no. When we do that, if we can, give you to someone else, or point you to someone else, or give you to someone else as a burden or whatever, or opportunity, that alleviates this guilt and a little pain that we have as the rejecter. So at that moment, you should give that person a chance to actually give a referral by asking for one. And a lot of times it can be a win-win situation for both of you.
Well, not only is that powerful, but it leads into another thought that I remember that you talk about, is how rejection can become a measuring stick for us. Through rejection, we get to discover how much pain we're willing to experience in order to achieve the outcome or some result that we're pursuing. And again, it seems to that end, if you really have a big why or a big purpose in what you're pursuing, that moment of asking for a referral or asking for help, it seems to me as an evidence that we've got a bigger, larger picture or a purpose, and that if that person understands that that's what we're trying to achieve, they can be a huge help or conduit towards achieving that bigger purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. So I tell people to write down a number of rejections they're willing to go through before they take on any request. Just write it down. And when you write it down, don't write it down a random number. I really think about it. How much does this mean to you? If you're like, there's something I will ask, but I will give up after one rejection, it probably doesn't mean a whole lot to you. Maybe you should use your time on something else. But if this thing is worth 20 rejection to you, it probably means something. If it means 100 rejection to you, it probably means a lot. And a lot of times, for example, if my kid is sick, knock on wood, how many rejections do I have to go through to actually cure him? How many doctors do I want to go through? And the number probably is going to approach infinity. But we don't. But we say that in our mind, but our actions are very different. What happens is when we have a request, we go through, like, we think, oh, we're never going to give up. But after a couple rejections, it's like, this is probably not going to work out. We'll try something else. Oh, I'm already tired of this. Or other things have more probability to get done, right? So there's a number associated with every rejection. We just have to go through that number. But a lot of times we go through like 1 or 2 or 3, then we're done. It's because we don't like the pain. So that's why I ask people, what's your number? What's your number that you should, write down that number, and don't give up before you finish that number, and often the larger the dream is, the more impactful the results are, the larger the number is. So ask yourself this question: is your dream bigger than rejection? So how many? Is your dream rejection worthy? How many rejections is your dream? Is your goal worth? Right? So write it down, and when you have that mindset, things become clear, and you're a lot more persistent, and you're a lot more rejection proof.
Well, talking with you is so important to me that I set my rejection number at 43. I wanted to be at least one above the bodybuilder guy. So I figured I'd go for one more than that.
Awesome.
But we didn't have to get to 43, so that's good.
I didn't know you were doing that, but Charles, I would say yes to you on the first one. It really just, you keep asking, you're giving me a chance to actually fulfilling my wish to say yes to you. A lot of times it just like things happen, right?
Oh, they do.
And during the past year, I did a lot of interviews during my book tour.
No doubt.
And I got I got a little bit of overdose on the interview. So I'm like, I'm gonna take a break on it, right? I'm gonna take a break on podcasts. I'm gonna take a break on everything. And this has been like a year, and I feel like I can do this with a refreshed mind. But you keep asking, you give me a chance to do it. So I appreciate that.
It's been my pleasure. You had a really great, touching story about a business school classmate, Scotty Smiley, who redeemed a pretty horrible accident by choosing to use it rather than playing the role of a victim. Can you give me your perspective on Scotty's story and the lessons that you learned and how to look for deeper understanding to be found in huge setbacks?
The thing is the story of Scotty Smiley has inspired me for many years. Scotty was a classmate of mine at the Duke, in the Duke Business School. So, I didn't know him until I was in the class, and and he was always sitting in the back, and it looks like he was blind. So I didn't know what's going on until the teacher told us that his story. It turned out that this guy, he was a Iraq veteran. And during his tour in Iraq, he was blinded by suicide bombers, and the story was the suicide bombers driving a truck and to his compound, and he had a choice to make. He could shoot the driver and kill him. Or he chose to spare his life for a moment, so he shot a gun in the air as a warning shot, right? And because he did that, the suicide bomber pulled the trigger, and the car exploded before he could reach, too close to the compound, and the explosion, in the shrapnel of the bomb blinded him. And so he came back. He was released from the army, and he came back. And he said, it's often said the biggest fear for a man is to lose his sight, right? So his world is dark, and he's got wife and kids and everything, and so there's that. If you're talking about rejection, that's like the biggest rejection in your faith, right? You turn blind for the rest of your life. But the thing is, he watched the movies for Forrest Gump. He didn't want to be the I forgot the name, the guy in the character in the movie who was crippled by the bomb, but he complains all day. He was very, very bitter all day. He's like, I want.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So he's like, I have a choice to make, and I don't want this being blind to define me. I want my reaction to this to define me. So ever since that, he just went on all these great journeys. So he was he went on skiing. He finished a triathlon, and he climbed these mountains, and he served, and he did all these type of things that normal people would do. Like the people wouldn't. Like people are lazy, right? We wouldn't do that, but he skydived, and he just had all these. He had a blast. He was like, I'm gonna live it to the fullest, right? I'm gonna turn my reaction to being blind to this rejection, and to define myself. And then so he applied for business school. He got into Duke. He became my classmate, and so I just remember the moment where one day, so before leaving, I went up to him. I said, "Hey, Scotty, this is Jiang." He's like, "Hey, Jiang," and I said, "Can I help you to go out?" So usually he has someone to help him to go out to outside of the building after class, and his wife and kids will be waiting for him. So so I want to be that guy that day. I just want to help him. So he's like, "Yeah, thank you." So I held his hand walking out of the building, and his wife, lo and behold, his wife and kids are there. And so he was just hugging them, and then he said thank you, and they left. And at that moment, I was just like, what a guy. Like, how can anyone feel sorry for him? And how can anyone not, like, if he can turn being blind into a moment that he can use to define himself, rather than letting blindness define him passively. Why should we use rejection? Why should we let rejections define ourselves? We should let our reactions to rejection define ourselves. So, so that's why the story of Scotty Smiley has always inspired me.
That's a powerful story. I think it does have a lot of power. Another one of the important lessons that I got out of your experience was the one of helping your wife, Tracy, land a job at Google by focusing on process or steps that she could control versus ones that she couldn't. You put a number and you put a process to the process of applying for this job.
Yeah, so actually it's not just my wife now. This methodology has been so powerful and successful. I actually run this program here from my church locally, and so if people look for jobs, right, and we look for jobs, we're really easily to get frustrated. We're thinking, wow, it's so hard to find a job. It is hard because when you go online and apply, right, your resume goes into a black hole, and it's tough to actually make it out of the black hole. If you do make it out, and then you're in a pool of like 10 to 20 people who apply for a job, and then then you would be interviewed and eventually get a job. So you're competing against hundreds of people, if not thousands, trying to get a job. So but this 100 Days of Rejection has taught me that by having conversations, by having a number in your mind, by asking people for help, it actually works. If you're not afraid of rejection, you can actually find job this way. So so at the end of my 100 Days of Rejection, I asked my wife, you have my wife has been really helpful, like extremely helpful to me throughout my life, and my married life, and she helped me to become entrepreneur. She encouraged me, and and I was like, now it's like I'm fulfilling my dream. How can I help you to fulfill your dream? What's your dream job? And it turned out her dream job is to work at Google. It's really tough to work at Google because there are really literally thousands of people applying for every job. And you have to be the most qualified, but also you have to have the connection. So, and I was like, I can help you with that, and if you can follow this journey I went through, this 100 days of journey I went through, you can get a job at Google. So what we did was I asked her to actually reach out to different people at Google. Like I said, let's do it. Like just keep asking until you hit a number. And so we asked her to use LinkedIn, asked her to use emails and Facebook or her alumni network, and try to find different Googlers, or sometimes just strangers, right? The strangers who has a job that she might want. So I asked her to reach out to these people and ask them for help. Tell them blindly, tell them straight that she wants a job at Google. She wants to develop a career at Google. She wants to get their advice, and she wants to get their help. Is there any way they can have a conversation? So by doing that, and very quickly, she found out, like I found out in my 100 days of rejection, people are so kind. People want to help. People are welcome to these inquiries from people, even others, especially if you write it well, especially if you give a good reason. And people start saying yes to her. So she started having these conversations one after another, and those conversations turned into referrals to interviews, and she started getting interviews left and right. She was so busy interviewing, and like sometimes there were like 2 to 3 in a day. And so eventually, long story short, she got a job at Google in about just a little bit about 2 months. So that changed our life because we were living in Texas, but the job she was finding was in California. So we the consequence of that is we uprooted our family and moved from Austin, Texas to California, to the Bay Area. But hey, it's her dream, right? So right now she's been working at Google for 2 years now, and I'm very glad that we did this. So it goes to show that you and your dreams sometimes are not that far away if you aren't overcome by the difficulties and the prospect of rejections. If you can have a way to systematically face rejection, look for rejection, embrace rejection, and handle rejection, a lot of times you can realize your dream in a lot quicker than you thought.
Powerful story. Yeah, that is one that has been a great example for me, as I am looking for guests for the show frequently, asking for referrals and following up, and great people come as guests with more persistence and follow up. So, inspiring story. What are some fears that you are struggling with right now? Any obstacles or difficulties that are in front of you at this point, and how do they show up?
I think my biggest challenge, my personal challenge, the next step is to be a better leader. So meaning I tend to have this solopreneur mentality, or I can do everything myself mentality, or the mentality of if I don't like to do this, I shouldn't let other people do this either mentality, which is not a great mentality for an entrepreneur. Being an entrepreneur is you have to not let yourself be a limitation of your business or your venture. You have to empower other people to do what they're good at, to do something you are not good at, or to do something that you can spend, you can outsource, so you can spend your time on something else. So this is what I've been dealing with right now, and I've gradually been working on overcoming this. And as a result, I'm hiring more people, and I'm more free to empower other people, and I'm actually developing an internship program here locally, and I want to hire interns, and I feel I can have a lot to offer them, to teach them, to become fearless. And in turn, they do work for me for a certain amount of time. So these are the skills, that people skills and leadership skills that I'm continually to learn. And I found they're highly crucial in whatever I do.
What is something that you believe in the core of your being to be true that most other people won't agree with you on?
I don't believe in things in random occurrence. I do believe in things happen for a reason. So that's one thing I believe in. Another thing I believe in is I think the world is much nicer than we think. You know, we often...
I agree.
Yeah, we often focus our different... I mean, if you get on TV, right, if you hear these pundits, they talk about, all they talk about is how different we are, how our world is falling apart, how we are, we can't get along, like we're very tribal, we're very, there's a lot of racism going on in this country and all this. The thing is, I think if we focus on the commonality, what unites us, but also what's common among us, instead of focusing on what's different among us, I think the world is a lot better. It can be the world can be a lot better than we think. The world is a lot better than we think if we don't focus on the things that are dividing us. So so those are the things I believe in.
Hear, hear. I agree with you entirely. I think if we will pull away from the media more and listen to each other and have conversations of depth and thought, we'll realize, a lot of people are a lot friendlier and more helpful. At least that's been my experience as well. So, yeah, good on you. Are there a couple of books that have affected or impacted you that you'd like to share, and anything that made a difference about them to you?
Yeah, definitely. I really like the book Influence, and that book has influenced me a lot, and the book talk about how there are different ways you can convince and persuade people, but it asks you to do it in a very, very authentic way. So, that book I really like. And there's another book that's really interesting, was called Made to Stick. The book came out about less than 10 years ago.
Yeah, Chip and Dan Heath.
So they are, it talks about how to make a good story stick, right, in marketing or anything else. And I just... part of my career right now revolves around being a speaker, speaking at different places. And I use a lot of principles talked about in that book to give talks, to tell stories, and I think that book has made a lot of impact on me.
The first book you were talking about, Influence, was that Robert Cialdini?
Yes, Robert Cialdini.
Yeah, both of those are great books. So yes. Glad I asked. So what do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered for that, whether that's through my book or through my talk, I actually help other people to inspire them to go after their dreams, so they can do all kind of amazing things. They can reach their potential, and they can get over their fear of rejection, so they can achieve those dreams.
Good. Is there someone who is outside of the spotlight but doing something important that's having an impact that the world should know about?
I mean, a lot of people do have 15 minutes of fame but I think more importantly, if people are consistently doing something important and then achieve their own dreams, if they don't give up, I think that's worthy of of praise. One person, her name is Michelle Poler. Maybe you've heard of her, but she's the person who did 100 Days of Fear. I think she got, partially inspired by what I was doing. And so she started, every day she was facing a different fear, like doing a public speech or getting Brazilian waxed or something like that. So she did this for 100 days and she started gaining a lot of traction. She started having fun. She started inspiring other people to overcome their own fear. So that's one person I can point out to.
Is there one thought that you would like to leave with the community of listeners that you believe can make a difference in their lives?
Yeah. So, I mean, I mentioned this already, right? So let the world reject you. Don't reject yourself. So if there's anything, when you get rejected, that's a good thing because you tried. That means you're active. That means you pursued it. That also means rejection is not the end of the conversation. A lot of times it's the beginning of the conversation. But more importantly, you went and asked, right? You're already ahead of most people. Most people don't ask for things. Most people just stay passively going through life and wishing life is easy, wishing life is rejection-free. So what you want is not rejection-free. What you want is being rejection-proof. That's also the title of my book. But more importantly is the mentality. So that's a thought I want to leave to your to your audience.
Good. Well, I appreciate this time with you. If someone wants to be able to follow your work or just connect with you, what places are best in the interwebs?
Then come to my website. It's called fearbuster.com. Fearbuster.com.
Great. And that information will be in the show notes as well. Jiang, thank you. It's been well worth for me, for the persistence and the follow-up.
Yep.
I have looked forward to this conversation since the day we met in your workshop. We're doing this conversation, I believe, while you're in the car and on the go, but I appreciate working it in and having this. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to The Creator's Journey. If you enjoyed our theme music, the name of the song is You've Got a Home by Krista Wells. The Creator's Journey is published the first and third Sundays of each month, except for July and December. If you enjoyed the show, I would appreciate having you go to iTunes and subscribe. While you're there, if you give us a favorable rating and review, it'll make a huge difference in helping a newcomer easily find it. You can find links to today's guests, the people and books we talked about, and email me with your wonderful thoughts, all at thecreatorsjourney.com. I want to thank Yodelist for sponsoring this episode of The Creator's Journey. Yodelist is an interactive marketing platform for people in the creative world. With a vetted database of contacts from across the industry, Yodelist helps photographers, illustrators, creative directors, designers, producers, stylists, and many others to locate potential clients and gives them the tools to make those connections happen. If you want to find out how Yodelist helps creative people find one another for work, just go to yodelist.com. Today's podcast is also brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/TCJ. There are over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player.